everybody, it's Drybear. Season 1 for the First Descendant is just around the corner next week, and I wanted to put together a list of things that I've been griping about or things I'd like to see changed going forward, even if these things don't make it into the launch of Season 1. In fact, most of them won't. As we go forward into mid-season and Season 2, I would love to see these kind of changes be made to the game, as I think it will make the process and the core gameplay loop a lot more enjoyable. And I'm sure everyone has their own personal list of things they'd like to see, quality of life changes, new features, and content like that, and I'll put more of the debatable things towards the end of the video that might just be maybe they're a good thing for the game, maybe not, and you can put your idea or your comments down below on whether you agree with the direction that I'm suggesting. And personally, I'm very happy with where the First Descendant is. I'm having a great time, and most of my desires for the game is just more content. I want more dungeons, more bosses, more maps, more characters, more ultimates, more modules, all of that, and just more things to do, because overall, aside from Eskimo pointing a gun at someone, I think that it's a very fun game at its core that is exciting and fun to play. I'm going to roll through these in no particular order. The first one that I really want for the game, just in general, is a better store option setup. I think that this game it has some options that are decent for the core gameplay and are mirroring most of the First Descendant's competitors and what they do, but I think this game is sorely lacking a easy buy or no-brainer buy option. This is very common in monetization and microtransaction systems in games nowadays, especially if they're free to play. You want to have a very no-brainer, like, of course you're going to get that choice that is just obvious to everyone. And I don't think that there is anything in First Descendant that fits that bill right now. I'm talking about like the $5 subscriptions in gacha games that give you, $35 worth of currency throughout the month as long as you log in, or really clear, easy options. I would say the only thing that comes close in the First Descendant is the Battle Pass. So what I'd like to see is some way for players to, over time, trickle small amounts into the game and get to where a lot of the paid players are. So maybe something that's like $5 a month or $7 a month that gets you like one Descendant slot, and maybe it has like a flat 10% boost to firearm, gold, Kuiper, and character boost. It's not as strong as the boosters you'll find in the store overall, like the things that can make you better. It's not going to be as good, but I think it's a very easy no-brainer option that over time, if you stay committed to the game, you play the game a lot, you'll eventually get all the slots you need by buying this monthly thing that's very cheap and easily accessible for a lot of players. The next one is better looting, and I think there's a lot of different directions that can go with this one. This is probably the most obvious that people are going to want in general. I think unless you buy a large amount of maximum storage slots or your mastery maxed out, and even then you still run into problems where you're constantly, like every single mission, having to dismantle reactors, dismantle external components, dismantle useless purple weapons that don't give you any value, and you're constantly having to do that because the loot that you get, a lot of it is going to be tough or not very useful other than the dismantling process. I think that games like Lost Ark do this quite well, where there's some kind of auto dismantling feature. You can say that, say any external component or any reactor that's purple, auto dismantle it. I don't want to look at it, or maybe you can set parameters. I get that they want to sell extra slots, and auto dismantle might go counter to that process, but I think that the idea that if I'm farming for long periods of time, but because I haven't spent the $100 to $1,000 to max out my storage that's required, I'm constantly having to go to my inventory, mark a bunch for dismantle, go back to the game, and I'm doing that so often, depending on what you have on you, that it just becomes very cumbersome overall. Next one is related to the storage, which is kind of like the storage there, and I get that, again, they do want to market what what items you have available, right? Stash tabs, inventory space, convenience, things like that are a big part of monetization for games like this. And I'm not advocating that they give you a base storage size of 1,000 or 2,000 for items you put in storage, but I'm somewhat of a collector. I like collecting. You can see I have the blue version of every weapon. I have every weapon in the game. And I feel like if you collect just one of every item in the game and you're already close to maxing out the core storage, I feel like the core storage isn't isn't big enough. I would feel like where the core storage, like your stash space, is so unbelievably small, considering how many different loadouts you're going to want to save, how many different reactors you're going to want to save, external components, different weapons, and every time they add new ultimate weapons, that's more storage that you're taking up in your storage box. I feel like the storage base is just a little bit too small. I would also really like to see some kind of auto looting system. This one is a slippery slope in some cases because you do want it to be part of the process to go and see loot on the ground and go collect it. And they have teased that they want to do a companion system, and maybe they'll have some kind of loot vacuum mechanic that comes along with that towards the end of season 1 or maybe going into season 2. And I think that will make things a lot better and a lot easier to make the looting process there. And I also think they probably need like some tweaks to the overall intelligence of the loot drop system. I know Destiny has some cool systems, and even the Division has some cool systems along this where it'll try to drop you ammo that you need the most, right? Where if like you're maxed on impact rounds and you're using a special rounds weapon, it doesn't keep dropping impact rounds over and over and over and over, where you can't really do anything with that because you've already maxed it out. I'd also love to see a little bit more aggressive garbage cleanup for some things in the area. The biggest offender of this right now is the loot globes that open amorphous materials, especially on reactors. When you finish fighting the reactor boss, the globe will linger for a set 5 minutes regardless, and I think it's a pretty easy choice to just say that those globes should disappear once there's no one around that can use it anymore. The game knows already whether or not, you know, someone can access the globe. When you walk into a globe you weren't a part of dropping, then you're not going to be able to use it, and once everyone knows where that globe is and the game says no one can use this, it should just auto disappear. The next one is what I'm going to call teleporting shenanigans, and this one I'm sure every player that's played the First Descendant has experienced this many times, and that is there is a very simplistic, overly simplistic decision-making process that goes into teleporting you when you're away from your party, and it's really just a distance thing. If you're just too far away from a party, remember when they start a process, it will teleport you to them. However, this system is way undertuned to the point where you can start a boss encounter first for your party, but then when your party comes behind you and enters the boss arena, now you're too far away from them when they start their encounter, so it'll then teleport you to them, removing all of your buffs, removing all of your effects, removing all of your actives, because you are now far away from them even though you started the boss encounter. Same thing goes for Outposts. There are times where you will start it as a Sharon, start smashing in stealth the different generators, and then the other Sharon starts but you're too far away and it teleports you over to her, breaks your stealth, ruins the infiltration, and breaks it. The teleporting is just completely out of control, and I think the shenanigans need to be polished up very soon. The next one I think is also low-hanging fruit, and again, there might be a technical limitation that's preventing this from being changed in the game, and it might just be a personal preference by the devs that like it this way. But personally for me, in a PvE game, I don't like the idea that there is player collision between teammates in a PvE encounter. I don't like the fact that I can be like when you first spawn into a Colossus fight and your 3 teammates are in front of you, you can't move because you can't walk through teammates, or you're in a party and you're trying to get past someone and it stops all your momentum. This is obviously a big thing for bunny players that use bunny, but even any character, you can get body blocked by teammates, you can get blocked from picking something up, you can be blocked in a doorway, or you can be knocked off a ledge, or you're trying to grapple and you get bumped because your teammate is running into you. And I think in a PvE game, there really isn't any major reason why you can't walk through your teammates, because in Albion, this is already the case. When you go up to like Ana East and go to the research area, you can walk through teammates there because they don't want people to be able to block you from the NPC. I don't see why we wouldn't just extend that to combat encounters, so you can actually just freely move around, freely loot, grapple to where you want to go without constantly running into people that are in the session that you're in. Like, they already do it. We know it's possible. We know it's here. Let us do this normally. Like, if I could just do this when in a mission, I can just pick up and loot whatever I want, I feel like the game would feel a lot more fluid and a lot more enjoyable, especially on console, where you can't turn as quickly when you know you're heading towards the collision. Next, I think that there needs to be some cleanup on the combining process. So right now, you can combine mods. You combine 4 mods together, and you can create a new mod from that process, which is how you create some of the most important mods, or some of the rarer mods as well, but it's also how you fill out your red Transcendent mod inventory as well. The problem is right now is you can really only do this manually. You have to put in 4 mods, click the button, and then load it, and then keep doing it over and over and over. And I feel like this process is incredibly cumbersome, and after you do it like the first 1,000 times, it starts to get really, really old with that, especially since when we have a dismantle option to just go down here and click select all duplicate mods, I can press a button and I can dismantle mods to get Kuiper. I think they should do the same thing for combine, and they probably even just want to, like, ideally, I think it would be best if you could enter a menu that says set parameters for combining, like combine any mods that have duplicates over 2. So like leave me an extra mod, don't consume that, or like only combine mods that are the same socket type or same type if you're trying to farm something, or just try your best to make these kinds of mods and then go and combine everything. But having to sit here over, like literally just sit down for a good 10 to 30 minutes every time you finish a day of farming, and you have to go and manually turn in all your mods to combine them, is just incredibly time consuming. Next, I would love to see a very quick way to see your weapon proficiency, and this is kind of a minor thing to be fair, but when you're leveling up your weapons, you kind of have to keep entering your inventory and then looking at them one by one to see when they hit 40. But when you're leveling up characters, you can just use the thing in the top right corner where you just say, okay, I'm this character, I'm this mastery level, I can look at that, and when I'm ready to use a catalyst, I can do it and I can go back to farming. I wish there just was, at a glance, an easier way to see what proficiency level your weapons are at so you can finish it. Pretty minor, but I would like to see it. Next, I think there needs to be some improvements to the party UI and representation in the Colossus fights specifically, but just in general. I think you really actually do need to show that a party member is down but not out or incapacitated, like a lot more aggressively, especially when people are just playing from their couch, they're 10 feet away from their TV, and having a small icon that's kind of red in the corner of your eye, I feel like isn't enough for the average person to clearly see that they have a teammate that they need to save from passing away on the ground. So if that was a lot more obvious and a little bit louder when that happens, I think that would make the group play, especially in Colossus, a lot more engaging and cleaner. And along the same lines, I think they need to change any instanced battle to always show your teammates on screen. There's actually a leash range right now that is meant for the open world, where if you're grouped with players, if they get too far away, their name, their icon, and their in-world HUD element disappears if you're too far away. And I feel like if you're in a boss battle, especially a boss battle that requires you to spread out far away, it doesn't really seem meaningful or worth it to fade them at a distance if there's not really anywhere else they can go. There's plenty of times in some of the Colossus encounters where you get so far away from your teammates where, again, they could be knocked down, but they're so far away that they've maximized that range. Their UI element disappears. You can no longer see them. You can see their character, but you don't see the HUD element because they're too far away. You lose that information. And I think that there's no reason to hide that information in a Colossus battle where you're working together, because you're in a locked arena anyway. So I think player information should always be visible, and in some cases a little bit more visible in specifically Colossus battles. The next one is super straightforward, and I think that it would make the game a lot better. Currently, you see anything that is a reactor or a mod or a weapon on the mini map. So you actually will see those. You can see the top left corner here as I'm farming, you actually have those shown on screen. However, currently materials don't show on the mini map, and I think that is a huge problem, a huge miss, right? Especially if you're farming purple or higher quality materials. You know, an Enzo comes by behind you and opens a vault, and you will get access to whatever drops because you're in the same instance as him, but the materials don't show on the mini map, and so you might miss it entirely. Or something like a foil or some kind of molecule or some kind of useful material drops, a purple material that you're trying to farm for drops. It's 10 feet away, but it's not on the mini map, and you might end up missing it. And I feel like they should always show on the mini map. If they're going to show all the purple weapons that no one cares about at endgame, then they should also show the materials, because I think that's a very valuable item that you'll want to know about. Also, I think that the lost and found system needs to be extended to include high rarity items that drop. So right now, the lost and found only accept items that are from mission completion. So if you complete a mission or a dungeon or whatever it is, the mission completion items, if there's no room in your inventory, will be sent to your lost and found. This doesn't extend currently to dropped items, and there's been plenty of times, I'm sure it's happened to you, it's happened to everyone in my chat, where you see a red mod drop and fall off a cliff, or you zone away because your party leader, you know, zoned, and you can see the red mod in front of you, but you can't grab it, and you disappear, and the mod's gone forever. It just gets sent to the void. So I think that anything that's ultimate quality or higher, or you know, ultimate or transcendent quality that drops on the ground, it should just get automatically sent to your lost and found, and that should extend to include dropped items, not just mission completion items. The next thing is, I think that they should put an in-world timer that isn't tracked for Outposts specifically. You could argue this is a subjective thing or could add to the clutter of the game in general, but I found that anytime I'm running an Outpost, I will always mark it on my map and then watch the timer on screen, as you can see right here. But you have to mark it every time, otherwise you won't see the timer. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want it to be in your face if you're standing on it, but I think that having this on for timer is kind of the general use case for Outposts anyway. It could be a short leash range where you're only within like the perimeter of the outpost it shows, but I think it should always have an in-world timer because that's what people are waiting on anyways. It may as well just be part of the core loop of doing Outposts, especially if you're running them for infiltration. The next one is just kind of a request to update the reactor farm, and I'm someone who does play, you know, games for a living, so I'm not really the general audience, right? I'm not the target audience here. I'm more of the enthusiast level. And I think that for people that play the game casually, getting good reactors actually takes a ridiculous amount of time because they're pure random. And this is actually going to get worse and worse as we add more ultimate weapons to the game, because it randoms everything on the reactor. It randoms the ultimate weapon mounting, it randoms the stats at the bottom, and you have to and it randoms the element as well, unless you're kind of farming in a specific spot, a specific time of week, specific on the schedule to get what you want. And even then, most reactor, like once you're actually at endgame, most reactors are pretty useless. Like they're actually all bad. I've gotten to the point where I have to like remind myself to actually look at the reactor and read it just in case, because there's just like 99% of the reactors are just terrible because they're not what you want, they're not the right weapon, or you get the situation where you get the right mounting but the stats suck, or you get great stats but the mounting sucks and you just have to constantly run it over and over. It would be nice if there was some kind of solution for this. It doesn't have to be like drop them and you can pick your answer. I'm not asking for the perfect solution, but something that allows you to get to where you're going that's not just pure random run your head against a brick wall, farm until the perfect golden chalice drops on the ground and you have your reactor. We have this with weapons. You can reroll the stats. We have this with other options. You can swap things in and out. With reactors, you're just praying against hope and wondering if you're going to get the right one. And I think that can be improved. Next is one that I would love to see implemented in the game. I think currently there's probably a few too little loadouts available to you. Even when you max out your mastery, you could probably use with a couple more at base. But I think if they don't want to budge on that one, that's whatever. There's one change that I would love to see made to the loadouts that I think would make the loadouts that you do get without having to pay 150 caliber for each loadout a lot more viable. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. I think that the loadouts should be replace if the slot is not empty. So for example, you could make a loadout here, and if you put a reactor and external components on it, but you didn't fill a Descendant and you didn't fill weapons, then it just wouldn't override whatever your current one is. That's not how the loadouts work right now. You have to save current settings, that's the only way you can put it into it, which has to be a full build. It has to be a character, it has to be 3 weapons, it has to be a reactor, and it has to be external components. If you save, so for example, if I were to save, like take my weapons off and then go into the preset and save preset, I can save it and it saves the empty slots. So if I were to equip my weapons, like whatever weapons, put these on here, and I put these on, and then I go to the preset and I load and apply the preset, it's going to remove my weapons. And I think it would actually go a long way on the loadouts if you could have loadouts that only replace your reactor, or only replace your 4 external components, or only replace your weapons, or only replace your Descendant, or some combination in between. Because that will allow you to create a like, these are my externals when I go bossing. These are my externals when I do dungeons. These are my 3 weapons when I do this. And that way it doesn't force you to overwrite your Descendant. It doesn't force you to overwrite the slots here. And you can have more very specific usage on the loadouts, not just a full character loadout, which I think would give the loadout system a lot more breadth and usability. The next one is around the logic towards mission monsters and how they go towards targets. So right now in the game, it's kind of frustrating. Monsters will just treat any nearby target, and sometimes they'll lock onto a target and follow that target all the way until they de-aggro. And it's actually a pretty big problem in some areas where you'll be in the middle of an open area, open space mission. Someone will come by that's heading over to the other side of the map, and they'll end up aggroing half your mission, and then those monsters will then follow that person for like 8 kilometers. Like they'll just go until they time out and then come all the way back. And it's pretty frustrating because I feel like monsters in general should prefer aggroing targets that are in the mission. Now, obviously there's issues and there could be some abuse cases with that where people join the mission late and try to get monsters to go a certain direction. But I think some kind of solution so that the monsters don't run off into La La Land across the map towards someone that's not even in combat or even part of what's going on. And the worst offender of this is probably one of the derelict on the Echo Swamp areas where there's a reactor underneath a fragment on top, and sometimes the monsters in the fragment mission will aggro the people under the floor, and they'll just start running around and jumping off a cliff and running towards them, and it becomes a huge problem of you trying to finish your mission because your monsters keep wandering off aimlessly like stray cats. The next one is, I would say, kind of controversial. This one you could probably argue would make the game better or worse depending on your opinion, but I think if this is going to be a true, like, plug-in kind of matchmaking where you just queue up with random people, you jump into encounters, and you have a great time no matter what platform they're on console, Xbox, or PlayStation, they're on PC, Steam, it doesn't matter. You jump in, plug and play with random people. I think that there should be some kind of notification, whether it's, you know, kind of light and soft touch or a little bit more aggressive, that lets players know when they have aggro from the Colossus. And I think, or even from like an elite or a commander. There's so many times where I have people in my party that end up getting aggro from the Colossus or the boss without realizing it. They go out in the open, they get one shot and they get downed, or they don't realize that they're dragging the boss off into a random place, or it just gets really awkward. And I think it would be probably better for the game if there was some kind of notification to say, hey, you're being targeted by the boss. It doesn't have to be loud and in your face, but some way that not only would help people that are just, again, playing on their couch 10 feet away from the screen to know that they're being targeted by the boss, but also for people that are hearing impaired or vision impaired to very, very easily see that they are now in danger and have to play very defensive. And this is also very true for Gluttony, the latest boss, where even if you have max defenses and decent enough resistances, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time and you take a shotgun to the face, you're still going to get 1 or 2 shot, and you have to be aware that you are being targeted by a boss like that. And if we continue down that trend of making bosses more and more threatening, I think the game would benefit from having that. The next one is a content request. Obviously, depending on what they want to do with the game, they could change this up, but I personally think that the Void Intercept arenas are a little bit too lore friendly. I mean, the idea is that these massive destructive creatures are coming to us from the void, and we are intercepting them before they reach our planet so that we can protect the people on our planet and they don't cause untold destruction. And so this ends up with this very basic, simplistic, all gray, metallic arenas that we have here. And it does help in clarity in some cases, because you can see the boss effects a lot clearer, but I also think that they start to get old over time, and I would love to see more variety and more intrigue with the Colossus Arenas that we're seeing right now. And the next one is a huge request. Please pray an ultimate Descendant schedule. I think that we are at a point now, especially with their timeline, that they can start giving us a timeline for upcoming ultimates and when ultimates will be added. Now, being an ex-developer, I understand how hard it is to shift up your schedule and sometimes things change, but I think because ultimates are built off existing characters that are already in the game, that have a rig, they have animation, they have voiceover, they have sound effects and VFX, they're already implemented. You're just updating the model and updating a couple things with how the character works. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that we should have a schedule of at least what the next ultimate Descendant is going to be, because people are investing in these non-ultimate characters without knowing that, you know, tomorrow or a week from now or 2 weeks from now, you know, we might randomly get an ultimate Kyle, and you just put a bunch of catalysts into Kyle, and now you're screwed over because of that. And I think that we're at a point that now we've gone past launch, we're moving into season 1, we're getting into the content treadmill of feeding that beast. We should be able to give us at least 1 or 2 Descendant ultimate timeline of like, hey, these are the next Descendants that will get an ultimate version, so that if you want to invest in ones that aren't on the schedule, you can do that with confidence, knowing you're not going to suddenly be surprised by some character you weren't expecting. And that's what I got. It's a list of just kind of hopefully very easy to implement or things to think about for the dev team in general. Let me know what your list is down below. I'm sure everyone has their own gripes and desires for the game going forward, and we'd love to hear from you guys on what you think could be making the game better, because overall I think the game's great and just needs more love, more quality of life, more content, more to keep keep the game community thriving and keep the people playing the game happy. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.